I want to start tonight by looking at a reality that the mainstream British media is desperately trying to rewrite in real time. For years, we have been told a comforting, thoroughly therapeutic lie about the state of social cohesion in modern Britain. We have been told that our institutions are solid, that our streets are governed by a single, unshakable rule of law, and that any friction occurring beneath the surface is simply the result of minor, isolated misunderstandings. Tonight, that entire illusion has collided head-on with a brutal, undeniable reality on the streets of England. We have just witnessed an explicitly violent, coordinated attack targeted directly at members and associates of England's national football ecosystem. It was an explosion of tribal aggression carried out by a specific, highly radicalized street gang operating inside our major urban centers, and in doing so, these perpetrators have just made the single biggest catastrophic mistake of their lives. If you want a raw, forensic breakdown of how a society reaches its absolute breaking point when the state refuses to protect its own cultural fixtures, subscribe to this channel right now, because what happened this week is not an isolated piece of football hooliganism. It is not a standard post-match scuffle. It is the violent manifestation of a deeper, systemic parallel society that has grown entirely confident in its own impunity, until now. Let's look directly at the anatomy of the mistake. For decades, radicalized criminal networks inside the UK have operated under the assumption that British authority is permanently soft. They have watched our police force back away from tense neighborhoods. They have watched successive governments prioritize community relations over basic criminal justice. They convinced themselves that the state would always blink first. But when you choose to take that lawless aggression and point it directly at the literal symbol of English national identity, the national football team and its community, you are no longer just fighting a retreating police force. You have manually awoken a massive, multi-layered cultural counter-response that cuts across class, across politics, and across the entire geography of the country. They thought they were starting a standard turf war. Instead, they have sparked a nationwide cultural reckoning that they are entirely unprepared to survive. The evaporation of impunity. To understand how these street networks grew arrogant enough to initiate a direct confrontation of this magnitude, we have to look verbatim at the history of institutional failure that paved the way for them. For over a generation, our urban centers have been subjected to a highly dangerous form of policing, one where officers are trained to look the other way out of a paralyzing fear of being labeled racially or culturally biased. We don't have to guess about this. It is documented in every major independent inquiry report published over the past decade. Time and time again, when organized, culturally distinct gangs have engaged in systematic criminality, intimidation, and territorial control on British streets, our leaders have chosen a calculated, repeated policy of institutional abandonment. The perpetrators looked at that history of official cowardice and drew a perfectly logical, highly cynical conclusion. They believed that they owned the streets. They believed that the average citizen was too intimidated and the state too paralyzed to ever push back. I want to pause right here and ask you a direct question, because your common sense is worth infinitely more than the collective wisdom of the Home Office. When you saw the initial reports of a coordinated gang launching a physical assault against a core British institution, what was your immediate reaction? Drop it in the comments below. Did you see it as a shocking, unprecedented escalation? Or did you recognize it instantly as the inevitable conclusion to 30 years of turning a blind eye to parallel societies? Tell me down below, because the absolute speed with which the public has run out of patience is the exact reason the political establishment is currently panicking. They know they can no longer paper over a structural breakdown of this scale with standard, empty public relations scripts. The paradox of the two-tiered system. The immediate physical symptom of this crisis is the complete collapse of public confidence in our justice system, specifically the widespread realization that a two-tiered system of law enforcement has been operating in the United Kingdom. When the working class populace protests or reacts to these societal shifts, the full, crushing weight of the British state is deployed instantaneously. We see fast-tracked courts, immediate maximum sentencing, and heavy-handed tactical policing. Yet, when organized, radicalized networks openly orchestrate street violence, intimidation, and territorial control, the response from the top is a series of vague appeals for calm and proportionality. This blatant double standard has created a toxic legacy. It has signaled to criminal networks that they possess a unique form of geopolitical leverage inside our own borders. But the gang that orchestrated this latest attack completely failed to calculate the unique cultural math of football in England. Football is not merely a sport in this country. It is the ultimate civil religion. It is the single space where the English working class retains a total, unshakable sense of ownership and collective identity. By attacking this specific community, the perpetrators didn't just break the law, they crossed a profound psychological red line. They united factions of the population that are usually entirely divided, creating an immediate, nationwide demand for a total systemic cleanup that the authorities can no longer ignore or defer. The realignment of British streets. While the political class scrambles to manage the media fallout from this disaster, the reality on the ground is shifting at a terrifying velocity. The illusion of permanent state soft-pedaling is evaporating in real time. The public response to this escalation is fundamentally transforming our political landscape. For years, anyone who pointed out the rapid growth of unintegrated, hostile parallel networks inside our major cities was systematically marginalized by the mainstream commentariat. They were told their observations were exaggerated, their fears unfounded. But when the violence spills directly into the mainstream cultural spotlight, the argument ceases to be theoretical. It becomes concrete, verifiable, and undeniable. This catastrophic mistake has effectively handed an absolute, total validation to the populist arguments currently sweeping through the electorate. Political movements that have spent years warning about the total erosion of national sovereignty and the breakdown of basic law and order no longer need to craft complex policy papers. They simply need to point at the footage of the confrontation and let the reality speak for itself. The public is looking at a system that demands maximum taxation and absolute compliance from its law-abiding citizens, while displaying total, submissive incompetence in the face of organized street violence. The threshold of tolerance has been crossed permanently. The final reckoning. What this entire chaotic episode ultimately exposes is the definitive breakdown of a political culture that has prioritized cosmetic appearances over structural truth for over 30 years. We have built a ruling class that genuinely believes a society can be held together entirely by public relations scripts, diversity statements, and strategic silence. They have operated on the assumption that if you simply refuse to talk about a problem on television, the problem will cease to exist on the streets. They have coddled, enabled, and protected parallel systems of authority inside our cities, sacrificing the safety of their own citizens on the altar of short-term political convenience. The tragedy for these violent street networks is that they actually believed the state's public relations myth. They genuinely thought the institutional weakness they observed in our politicians reflected the character of the entire nation. They failed to realize that beneath the layer of official compliance lies a vast, silent majority that has completely run out of patience for promises of cohesion that translate into violence on their doorsteps. The confrontation has occurred, the mechanism of a total systemic counter-response is officially in motion, and the countdown clock to a massive institutional correction is moving faster tonight than it ever has before. Make sure you subscribe to this channel and share this video immediately. Britain deserves an honest, unvarnished account of exactly why this threshold was crossed, made right now while the warning signs are glaringly visible, rather than months from now when the collapse of the old consensus is complete and the establishment pretends they saw it coming all along. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.